Hey there, this is your pal Pally, and welcome back to Git Er Raid. Warlords of Draenor beta testing continues on with some more heroic mode bosses. This next guy took some serious growth hormones, and I hear Colgarn from Ulduar was the supplier. This is Kromog Heroic in Blackrock Foundry, and this involves some heavy-handed mechanics for such a big guy. As always, mechanics can change from the time a fight is beta tested to when it is actually released live. So the massive size of this guy gives you a lot of space to spread out in and do your thing. He has a few simple mechanics, although many of them were buggy during the time we tested this encounter. Let's start with the tank mechanics, as they are somewhat easy. First off, if no one is close enough in melee range, Kromog will continually cast Stone Breath, and that does a massive amount of AoE damage. So it's obvious the tanks need to be close up on him. It's also probably good for the tanks to stack on each other because of his Fists of Stone. This is a cleave ability that splits the damage evenly between targets 15 yards near the tank. So tanks just basically stack and share the damage. Nothing much to that one. Speaking of straightforward, Warped Armor is a debuff he'll put on the tank, increasing the physical damage taken by the tank, and also reducing their movement speed by 15% per stack. That can get annoying later on, but can be cleared by things like Hand of Freedom or Master's Call. Last up on the major tank mechanics is Slam. This is a big conal attack that does more damage the closer you are to the boss. Tanks can just see how close they want to be in order to take this, and make sure the boss doesn't cast Stone Breath. Again, the tanks might be slowed some and might eat more of this than they intend to, although that didn't seem to be the deadly part for the tanks I was running with. So moving on to the other major mechanics, the boss will do a number of these abilities and then do a transition phase that we'll talk about in a minute. But for the normal phase, he will use Rippling Smash, Reverberations, and Rune of Crushing Earth. Rippling Smash is a huge frontal attack that you can avoid just by being out from the front of the boss when he casts this. That alone was hard to tell on beta, as he would seem to turn one way and do Rippling Smash another way. Just try to be running away from whatever direction he's facing before this goes off. Reverberations were simply some sonic rings that would come out every now and then. They move very slowly and are easily avoidable, except maybe in the case of melee that's stacked too close to the boss. They aren't too deadly, so eating one to the face isn't terrible, but might as well save your healers some grief. Rune of Crushing Earth seemed to be kind of broken. What is supposed to happen is two hands form up with a rune in the middle of them. Then they will slam together, and if anyone is caught in between, they'll take a crap ton of damage and be stunned for 5 seconds. The hands formed up, but when it slammed together seemed highly random. I guess you can just run around these just to be safe, but they really seem to be off on beta. So that's about it for the normal phase. He'll do all of those abilities for about a minute and then transition. This is kind of tricky. So basically he'll cast Rune of the Grasping Hand. This causes many runes to spawn on the ground. After a few seconds, those runes will turn into hands that grab any target on top of them and squeezes them to death eventually. You would think you should just avoid this, but after the hands grab people, he'll start to channel Thundery Blows. This knocks people up in the air really high and does some heavy physical AoE damage. Fortunately, if a grasping hand has you in it, you are shielded from the AoE damage and don't get knocked up. Of course, you can't hang out in the hands all day, so you have to DPS them down after Thundering Blows is done. But that is basically how this phase works. Get grabbed, DPS the hands down as Thundering Blow finishes, and profit. It should be noted that tanks can probably survive being knocked up and the AoE damage if they can do some sort of move to save themselves the fall damage. So for example, our warrior would get knocked up running a major cooldown, and would probably charge the boss when he got close enough to the ground, thus avoiding all of the fall damage. You'd then think, oh okay, maybe classes like hunters could disengage and avoid the fall damage too. While you can avoid the fall damage using the old disengage trick, the AoE damage going out is way too high, and even with deterrence you will still end up dead. So just execute the Grasping Hands mechanics with everyone else and don't try to be cute. Once Thundering Blows is completed, it's back to the normal phase and rinse and repeat. Once he reaches lower health, he is supposed to get a frenzy effect, increasing his damage and casts of abilities. He is also supposed to do another rune called Stone Geyser. According to the Dungeon Journal, this will shoot pillars of stone out of the ground that will restrict the space you can work with. I didn't get to a point in the fight to see this myself, and some reported they didn't even see it at all. So there are just a few points to cover with respect to strategy. For the most part, we position the tanks on one side of the room, with the melee on the other side, and range spread out. You probably don't need to have the range spread out, except for healers who need to keep an eye on the tanks. Eating reverberations isn't bad, and as long as everyone minds the casts of Rippling Earth, there isn't any particular reason to be spread out. Certainly you should try to plan some things for the Grasping Hand phase. Everyone should have a general area that they'll pick up runes. Only one person can get grasp per rune, so don't steal someone else's. We had a monk and a warrior tank, so we actually had the monk get grasped, while the warrior cheesed the Thundery Blow's knock-up and continued to tank the boss through the phase. The monk would get quickly broken out and get back to their duties. Everyone else would cleave down their own Grasping Hand as quickly as possible. It's even beneficial to do this as soon as the hand grabs you. You don't want to break it before Thundering Blows is over, but having it low quickly is great, and then, as a DPS, you can break out after the phase is over and help break out healers too. Planning some healing cooldowns was also good here. On beta, the hand seemed to interrupt channeled healing CDs like Tranquility and Hymn, but some reported that if you waited until the hand had a firm grasp, this wouldn't happen. The big goal is to make sure you can get everyone out before the first Rippling Smash of the next phase. You don't want anyone getting hit by that this late in the game. Beyond that, it just seems you rinse and repeat the phases, trying to survive till the end. Some raid groups reported having a fairly tightened rage timer on the fight, but we don't know if that's going to be the tuning when it goes live. I would assume using Lust near the end, when he frenzies, will probably be best to help you get done quickly. That's about all for this guide on Kromog Heroic in Blackrock Foundry. Tanks taunt off for the stacks of warped armor, watch the slam, and stick close to each other to eat his fists of stone. Healers try to save cooldowns for the Thundering Blows phase, and watch the tanks carefully. DPS avoid the Rippling Smashes, and get into the runes for Thundering Blows. Thanks for watching, and as always, please comment, like, and or subscribe to the video if you found it helpful, and have a good one!